My name is Gwyn Whittaker, and I'm with Green Fair Organic Cafe and also the Green Fair nonprofit, Green Fair Health and Wellness. And I'm very pleased to be here today at the invite of Farm Animals Rights Movement, the Farm USA organization, to talk about preventing and reversing cancer. So I'm going to start my screen share here. So I have the Green Fair restaurant in Herndon, Virginia. We actually do a 21-day kickstart. I'll be talking a little bit more about that later in the year, but we've had a lot of experience over the past 7 years in preventing and reversing pretty much all types of chronic illness, which has a root cause of inflammation. And we're going to talk about the root causes of inflammation that can promote cancer and give advice on how to avoid that and some resources on how to actually make it go away. So this is my message of hope. In 1964, as a brownie, I made this for my mother. It was an ashtray with my picture at the bottom of it. And in 1964, something like 65% of the American public were actually cigarette smokers. And so if you went into a restaurant or on a plane or in a car, smoking was pervasive and lung cancer was prevalent. It took something like 20 years and 5,000 research papers for people to recognize that there was actually not only correlation, but causation link with cigarette smoking. And so I like to use this message because it gives us a picture of hope that when people become educated and you change policies and the government adds warning labels on things, that behavior actually changes. So it went from being a norm to today, actually less than 6% of the American population smoke cigarettes. So my hope is that we're on the same path with the elimination of animal products and people making better choices on processed food and organic products. My background is not in the health industry. It's been in high performance computing and data analytics. I ran a company called Mosaic in the national intelligence community for 10 years. My company led the community in implementing competitive assets. So we put the first cloud computer at CIA, and we helped define the IT enterprise architecture. So I view what I do as enabling strategic advantages. And from a personal strategic advantage, learning about plant-based nutrition and organics and basically how to reduce and avoid inflammation is going to be very beneficial. So that's my mission today. So the National Cancer Institute is one of the 23 institutes at the National Institute of Health. And cancer is basically a disease where your cells grow uncontrollably and spread other parts of the body. The good news, I think, is that we all have cancer all the time, and we have natural killer cells that when they're operating correctly, they control the cancer and it never becomes an issue. By time cancer gets diagnosed, it's been progressing usually for over 10 years. So it's not something that has a sudden onset or starts immediately. So when you get a diagnosis, you have time to learn about it and take actions to try and reduce or reverse the growth. In this community, you'll hear sometimes Dean Ornish and people say that lifestyle genes are like a loaded gun and lifestyle is the trigger. I like to think of it like a roadmap that your parents give you maps. And if you follow the path that they chose, then you're going to end up in the same place. But if you take a different direction, then you can avoid ending up at the same place. So our genes express inflammation in different ways. If you read Dean Warnish, he's like the root cause of all of our chronic illnesses: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune diseases are basically an expression of how our body deals with chronic inflammation. So you can look to your grandparents and your parents and usually determine if you are exhibiting the same lifestyle traits that they did, then your genes will most likely express in the same manner that theirs did. So the opportunity is really to look at your history and then make choices that take you in a different direction. So at cancer.org, you can actually go and see what things are known to cause cancer. The first one is sort of interesting because it was not something that I had known when I was getting ready to open a healthy restaurant. At Green Fair, our logo is Healthy People, Healthy Planet. And I was new to the restaurant industry, but when I interviewed people in that space, everyone said, make sure you have your liquor license on day one. And so we had vegan wine and vegan beer that were on our menu. And at the session that I went to with Dr. John McDougall, he was actually invited to be Surgeon General under Barack Obama's administration, but turned it down. I was attending one of his retreats before we opened the restaurant, and he said, you know, alcohol is a known carcinogen. And I really hadn't heard that before. And, you know, he was talking about a single glass of wine for women increases breast cancer risk by 10%, and 2 glasses a day of wine increases breast cancer risk by 30%. And so those numbers were sort of staggering to me. So with our logo, Healthy People, Healthy Planet, I took alcohol and wine off the menu so that it was our restaurant is in line with our brand. And it's been something that we've been promoting. We do a Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine every year, and no alcohol, no smoking, healthy weight, exercise, and a plant-based diet are all part of that campaign. So alcohol is one of the things that is known as a class 1 carcinogen, things that are known to promote cancer. So if you have a cancer diagnosis, you should, and if you want to prevent cancer, then alcohol, you may want to exhibit a sobriety-free or sobriety lifestyle. And for me, I think it's been something like 4 years now that I haven't drank alcohol, and I really don't miss it. I think there's nothing like going to a party where you have full control of your mental capacity and can communicate and deal with other people with your own personality instead of one that's got alcohol tinge to it. Radiation, I think people generally know that radiation promotes cancer. You know, we get limited doses of that when we go to the dentist. Even at the dentist office now, they've changed their recommendation away from these 180 scans that they used to do, where they'd actually go around your face. So they've eliminated those, or they recommend not to get those, and they recommend not getting dental x-rays from 12 months to 18 months. So they've recognized that radiation is definitely an impact. When doctors start their medical career, they get advised that chemotherapy and radiation are known to promote cancer, but they also will shrink tumors. And then they go on to talk about how to make that happen in terms of treating cancer patients. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So processed meat, I think this has been in the news pretty much, that highly processed meats, so bacon, sausage, deli meats are things, again, they're known to promote cancer. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. Tobacco, today, lung cancer is still the #1 cancer in the United States, followed by breast, prostate, and colon cancer. So It's one of the most preventable cancers that are out there. If we could eliminate tobacco, then we would save a huge amount of money on medical treatment. There's also a very long list. If you go to cancer.org and look at the class 1 carcinogens, there's a huge list of chemicals, especially the insecticides, pyrethroid insecticides. These are heavily used in conventionally grown produce, and if you're buying organic products, then you're avoiding this higher risk of not only cardiovascular disease, but all-cause mortality. So buying organic means that there's something like 400 chemicals that you're not getting in your food. And if you look at, people say, well, organic is more expensive. I think the cost delta has come down significantly. And if you look at the cost of chemotherapy and cancer treatment, those are something like $10,000 to $12,000 per month. So that negates the cost differential, between organic and conventionally grown things. Class 2 carcinogens are things that are expected to cause cancer, but they haven't got definitive proof. Acrylamides are something that is the primary reason that French fries and potato chips are probably the 2 worst things that you can eat. When you cook starches at high temperatures, they develop something called acrylamides that are a byproduct of the starch in high temperature. And these are known to promote carcinogens. So if you have the frying platforms, you want to make sure that the temperature doesn't go over 350 degrees. And at Green Fair, we keep our oven temperature at 350 all the time, because again, starchy vegetables like potatoes and squash can develop these at high temperatures. Frying is pretty much the same thing. You're getting these not only starchy byproducts, but animal products turn to these acrylamides as well. So avoiding frying at all cost is a big benefit. Night shift work is sort of interesting. There's a book I'm going to refer to at the end of the class. It's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and he attributes the lack of sleep to chronic inflammation. So ensuring that you get 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep in somewhat of a pattern, regular pattern, is very important to maintaining good health. Red meat, I'll talk a little bit more about the meat and animal products when I talk about Colin Campbell. And again, the food industry tends to stay way ahead of EPA and cancer.org and the list of chemicals that are created to try and synthesize flavors and tastes and dyes and all these emulsifiers. It's been sort of interesting in the vegan community. There's an ingredient called soy protein isolate that's out there now. And if you see that, and all these palm oils are just as bad as eating animal products. So those are also things to avoid. So if you haven't seen this film, Forks Over Knives, it's pretty much what triggered my interest in this space. It came out in 2011. You can stream it on YouTube. And it talks about cancer and heart disease, the 2 most prevalent diseases in the United States. Something like 860,000 people die every single year from heart disease, and very close to that from different types of cancers. If you look at the logo of the film, it's eat with a fork and avoid a scalpel. It took me a while before I recognized that was the point of the film, but it's a documentary about how these 2 doctors, with T. Colin Campbell is a 60-year researcher in cancer, and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn was one of the premier heart surgeons in the 1980s, and how both discovered that animal protein was creating heart disease and most of the cancers that we have in the United States. and that with a reversal of a diet change, that you could basically not only prevent these diseases from happening, but you could also reverse it. And so in our experience at Green Fair, it's something that we see pretty much on a daily basis when people make these lifestyle changes. Things like congestive heart failure and elevated PSAs, breast tumors, and even terminal cancer diagnosis. People are able to take their life sort of back in their own hands. So it's an extremely powerful film and a great message that you don't have to be beholden to the cancer and heart disease industries. You can really eat your way and live your way to good health. In the film, Colin Campbell talked about how he grew up in a dairy farm, actually out in Loudoun County. He got married in Herndon Church down the street from Green Fair to his wife, Karen. And his bias during his, because of his dairy farm years, was that animal protein was actually higher value. And so he started working in the Philippines with malnourished kids and discovered that when they gave them dairy products, that they actually had a high incidence of liver cancer occurring. And so after a number of years of doing research on that, he actually found in human cells and in they could put different cancer cells in petri dishes, and depending on the amount of dietary protein, primarily this was with casein in dairy, they could actually turn cancer on and turn it off. So if they put the casein in the petri dish, the cancer would explode, and if they took it out, then it would diminish. And the more they turned it on and off, you can see the less impact it had over time. So when you are able to turn it off, you want to maintain consistent diet. Colin Campbell runs an organization called the Center for Nutritional Studies, and he has a program there that's a eCornell class. It's a plant-based certification that you can take. It's 3 college-level classes. And in that, they talk about animal protein. Not only it affects cancer from IGF, blood estrogen, free radicals, cancer mutation, and the decreasing of natural killer cells and DNA repair, the impact and inflammation also promotes heart disease and diabetes. And this is not just in the processed meats, it's in all animal proteins. So eggs, dairy, and animal flesh as well all promote these increases in chronic illness. The World Cancer Fund has this chart that we use as part of our program at Green Fair. If you are a healthy weight and you're physically active and you're eating a plant-based diet that's filled with primarily beans and greens, beans are the most closely correlated to a healthy diet that you can get because of the high fiber content. So there was something called the Hispanic paradox years ago, and because beans were such a big part of that population, even though they had other risk factors, their cancer was very low. So the microbiome, I think these days is your health, that the more diversity of plant foods that you have, the more robust your immune system. And the bacteria can be highly affected by drinking alcohol and other factors like meat consumption and high sugar intake. So there's a whole class on the microbiome, which is going outside and walking in the woods. You're actually not only getting bacteria, you're getting viruses and fungi and single cell organisms, and that diversity of life inside your body is what's basically protecting us. All of these bacteria are helping us to digest different foods and enabling our body basically to absorb the nutrients. There's a the charming lady, Dr. Robin Chutkin, she's got a book called Gut Bliss and the Microbiome Solution. And she talks about our cells being dwarfed by the number of bacteria that we have. And we're actually like a beehive that's walking around that's driven by bacteria. And so when you're eating foods like meat and sugar, then the bacteria that are created by those consumption of those products are going to flourish and dominate and create an imbalance and therefore inflammation in your body. And so diminishing those things and taking those pretty much entirely out is how you're going to get to sort of optimal health and nutrition. Fast foods are going to fall in the same category. The food industry, and especially in some of these plant-based meats that are coming out now, are very highly saturated with tropical oils, which are actually higher in saturated fat than beef fat. So avoiding those is probably a great idea. There's a book by Michael Moss called Hooked that talks about how executives from the big tobacco industry have moved into food and started using the same techniques to promote addictive behaviors in food. So small ingredients that salt, sugar, and fat primarily that drive us to make food choices where our brains are sort of diminished by these food addictions and the feeling of the endorphins and serotonin bursts that we get from getting things that are sweet and salty and caloric dense. So there are billions of dollars of research going in to drive these food choices, either from everything from how goods are packaged with bright colored labels to represent fruits and vegetables, to putting things on labels at the front of the package, like gluten-free potato chips. Potato chips don't contain gluten, so they create sort of these false impressions of what you're actually buying. And a lot of times you can read the ingredients list and you have no idea what kind of food product that actually is, because it's so far beyond anything that would be edible in the past. So eating things that are known from the 4 food categories that is mentioned in the green section here is whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans, and that's really the path to a healthful diet. I talk about sugar in the same category. The sweetened drinks or even juices are going to be extremely high in sugar. A cup of orange juice has got the same amount of sugar as a soda. So changing from soda to orange juice is not a good choice. It's the tricks that the food industry uses to get us to buy these products, or they concentrate either sugar by taking out the fiber, like in fruit juice, or they take out the water, like in raisins. So those 2 methods turn something that would be a healthful food into something that becomes caloric dense, and therefore is going to be biologically more attractive to us in that form. So recognizing those things and avoiding those things. It takes about a week to physically break a sugar addiction, and it's going to be about 30 days, more from a psychology standpoint, to break away from these foods. So sugar lights up the same place in your brain that cocaine does. And so, recognizing that and having a plan to get that out of your diet and your lifestyle is going to be very beneficial. I already talked about alcohol. Alcohol metabolizes immediately. It's basically the same as drinking sugar. And when you drink alcohol, it turns off your immune system for something like 2+ hours as your body is trying to address how to handle these toxins that just invaded it. It's like in Star Wars when you lose power and the shields go down. It's you're just open for enemy attack. So if you drink alcohol and you're in a crowded room where people have viral infections that can be spread, you're going to definitely be a sitting target for these viruses. It was a chart early on in the pandemic that was put up by the World Health Organization. It was basically 4 things. It was eat a plant-based diet, exercise, avoid alcohol, and avoid tobacco. And if you do those things, you have like a 70% less impact of COVID symptoms. And we definitely didn't see that spread widely in the United States. It was all about masks and social distancing. So the things that you can do yourself to empower yourself are the things that are really shown on this chart here. Supplements are the $60 billion industry is supplements, and they're selling fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you think that you may not be getting the right nutrients from your food, take a pill, is the message that they're trying to promote, and it's usually to your expense. If you're getting too many nutrients and there's no set amount for different people, but you get the right amount when you're eating a food. For example, an orange is going to have 5.7 milligrams of vitamin C. If you take a 5.7 milligrams of vitamin C in a pill, you're metabolizing, you're absorbing 5.7 milligrams. In an orange, you're actually absorbing 1,500 milligrams because it's in a package with all these other micronutrients that actually adds a boosting effect on the bioavailability of vitamin C in context of these other ingredients. So it's always better to eat the food than take a pill. If you're taking pills in doses that your body doesn't recognize, then your liver and kidney have to do work to take those out. So that actually creates stress on your body. And if you're with cancer prevention right now, that's usually a good idea, is to take everything out with the exception of B12. So this cycle is something, if you are getting a cancer diagnosis, it's go back and review this chart and drill down, decrease your weight, increase your physical activity. One thing that's not on here is that I'll mention a little bit later is around fasting. All of the longevity research these days shows that a 16-hour fast once a day is going to be optimal for human health. Our society tends to snack all the time, so people tend to eat through the day. And every time you eat, our body stops what it's doing, the natural killer cells, the bone replacement, taking out dead and decaying cells. All of these household functions sort of stop when food comes in. It's like we're very opportunistic engines. So I like to use the analogy when grandparents have the grandchild come over, they are not washing dishes, they're probably not vacuuming, they're not taking out the trash, they're not paying the bills, things that have to get done to maintain a household because the child comes in. And if the child was coming in every hour, you can see that it would be very disruptive to the household. So in the Kickstart program, we actually use something called time-restricted feeding, which promotes the concept of autophagia, which is when your body goes into extreme healing mode. And that's where you have this 16-hour fast, and then you have 4 to 5 hours between the two meals during the day. And Walter Longo at the Longevity Institute in San Diego has a book called The Longevity Diet, and there's a Dr. Alan Goldhammer at the Santa Rosa Clinic where they do 30 to 45 days of water fasting to help people with severe chronic illness actually have dramatic outcomes, and that happens when you stop consuming calories. So I'm going to move sort of into the recommendation phase. Whole plant is the language that we like to use. Colin Campbell coined the term whole food plant-based diet, but whole plant is really minimally processed fruits, vegetables, whole grains, seeds and legumes in their minimally processed form. And I'm going to add mushrooms in here. The more that you learn about the third kingdom, plants, animals, and mushrooms are an entire kingdom. And mushrooms have been used by the Asians for years for cancer treatments. Actually, reishi is specifically used in, I think there's something like 800 peer-reviewed trials around reishi mushrooms and different types of cancer treatments. It's been extremely successful in that space. So there's been a resurgence in the usage of mushrooms, and the prescriptive is a single mushroom a day decreases cancer risk by 20%. So these are cooked mushrooms that you would add to your diet, either in a salad or in a dish. So the prescriptive is avoiding animal products, as we mentioned, processed foods. And the last thing here is oils. Those would be, if you get a PubMed, you can take a look at this paper, but there's huge evidence that basically all of the oils promote the omega-3, omega-6 imbalance and create this inflammation that can promote chronic illness and cause weight gain. That's one of the precursors to cancer. There's a book that I'm going to make a recommendation at the end called The Cancer Survivor's Guide. It's basically Eat the Rainbow, is try to eat a fresh salad every day and ensure that you're getting a variety of greens and different plant materials, raw greens, sprouts, and then colors, carrots, bell peppers, the whole variety of colors that you're going to get by eating a variety of produce. And make sure you buy that produce in organic form, and you avoid all of the chemicals that get not only sprayed on the food, but can be absorbed through the roots by synthetic fertilizers that can be added in the space. As I was mentioning, the time restricted feeding is important. Your body clock actually resets pretty quickly. So 2 or 3 days of eating 2 meals a day and your hunger pangs stop and your body becomes used to that time of day to eat. If you eat before the sun goes down, before it gets dark, then your sleep is going to be much better. So that's another side benefit that it's all very, very cyclic. If you have better sleep, then your ghrelin, the hunger hormone in your stomach, and your hunger hormone is going to be decreased, and your leptin increases. So your satiety is better. So ensuring a good night's sleep is great. Exercise is extremely important for healing and regeneration of all sorts. So a minimum would be 30 minutes per day, and striving for an hour of exercise a day is really, really important. I mentioned this sleep, alcohol, avoiding smoking and smoke. It was interesting that the smokeless tobacco, the vaping is actually included in the known carcinogens as well. I'm going to talk just a few minutes about the Kickstart program that we do at Green Fair. It's a 21-day program that we provide to help people make these changes, because it can be intimidating if you're on a processed food or fast food diet, you don't have time or don't like or don't know how to cook. So we basically provide 2 meals a day for 21 days. And the way the program works is you come to class and take home 7 meals at the end of the class. And then you would pass by on the weekend and pick up another 7 meals. So every week for 3 weeks, you're getting 14 meals from us. And it's 42 different meals that are organic. and basically put them in your refrigerator and you pull them out twice a day to reheat for consumption. And then we couple those with fruit and a fresh salad, and people have really dramatic health results. We are doing these testimonials on our YouTube channel. We've had multiple people now do testimonials. Autoimmune diseases, Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis. We have 2 that are published now, where these one lady was actually getting 2 shots a month for rheumatoid arthritis, extreme pain in her joints and her hands. And in 21 days, she was able to stop this bi-monthly injection that her daughter was actually doing to her. So you can hear her story on YouTube. So she's basically pain-free, and that's been a couple of years ago. Another lady was able to reverse Crohn's disease. She's a professor at George Mason University, and kind of reluctantly came into the Green Fair program with her boyfriend. And she had Crohn's disease for 2 years. I'm sorry, 2 decades. And at the end of 21 days, all of her symptoms had disappeared. And if you know anything about Crohn's, it's usually every year there's like a week or more of hospitalizations because of extreme stomach distress. So for her, it was really getting her life back. In the medical industry, if you don't do some sort of reversal like this, it usually ends up having colon or yards of intestine removed. So it can be a really impactful disease. We're doing more testimonials. We have a lady that's reversed congestive heart failure in 3 weeks. She came in with this condition and she went back to her doctor, and at the end of the 21 days, her doctor is like, that you no longer have this condition. So we've seen really dramatic health reversals because of the things that we're doing might be considered extreme. We're, doing entirely plant-based nutrition that's organic, and with the fasting sort of combined with that, it has really dramatic impacts for people. We had one more story, was a fellow that had gotten down to 15 minutes of sleep per night. So he was just in agony. He had taken every sleep medication that was available on the market. And his wife weighed, I guess, 103 pounds, and he was overweight. And she was sort of terrified coming in that she was going to lose more weight. But actually what ended up happening was he lost 22 pounds and she put on 5. So her inflammation from some of the chronic inflammation that she had, when her inflammation went down, she was actually able to absorb calories and put on healthy weight. And he not only lost 22 pounds, but he was back to sleeping almost 7 hours a night. So that was a real gift to him, and a dramatic lifestyle improvement. So we offer this program pretty much every month. We have a new session in January that you can go to greenfair.com and see it advertised on our website. It starts on January 10th. It's on a Tuesday night. And then we're also going to be offering a session on that Saturday, which is it's the second Saturday, the 14th of January, from 9 till 11 on Saturday morning. So if you are more of a morning person and you want to take a class in the morning, you're able to do that. And this is fundamentally, most doctors do not go to nutrition class. And the thing that I recognized pretty early on is doctors, if you go in, they're going to diagnose your symptoms and you're going to get a script. And that's what most people expect when they go to see a doctor. The new paradigm now is that doctors are becoming trained in what's called the lifestyle medicine, where doctors look at their diet, their lifestyle, their exercise, sleep, stress levels, family history. And there's a sign on our door that says, if your doctor prescribes medications and hasn't asked about these topics, then you don't have a doctor, you have a drug dealer. And sort of unfortunately, that's, that's the path that we tend to go on in the United States. I'm going to wrap up here with these resources. You can find Green Fair. We're in downtown Herndon on 408 Eldon Street, near the Mom's Organic Market there. So you can stop in and have a meal. We also have a meal plan. So if you're too busy to shop and cook, you can take out ready to go meals. And the Kickstart program is offered there. If you appreciated this content, I have a health and wellness organization that does primarily education. So I typically go out and do talks on inspiring people on this path to health and wellness. We also host the Fairfax Veg Fest, which is going to be held on Sunday in 2023, April 23rd. And you'll get the opportunity to hear Dr. T. Colin Campbell listed below, Dr. Neil Barnard. We will have Dotsie Baus from the Game Changers, Dr. Robert Cheek, who's a vegan bodybuilder. Baxter Montgomery is a heart surgeon. So it's a fantastic opportunity to hear some great talks. We typically have something like 80 vendors there. All day music and fun. So it's a food and it's a great experience. We typically have 4,000 to 5,000 people there. So it's a great opportunity to learn. Some of our favorite books, I mentioned the China study and Future Nutrition. If you have a cancer diagnosis, these are critical books to read because they talk all about the history of how we went from treating cancer with food before the food industry and before the animal production industry. Cancer was not predominant in our culture, but today it's the number 2 killer in the United States. The Cancer Survivors Guide is a book that we stock at Green Fair. You can pass by and take a look at this. How Not to Die is a tome. It was a New York Times bestseller, and it's a very thick book on the research of how to optimize health and nutrition. And the sleep book, I think, is extremely impactful to me. It's probably the most interesting book I read a couple of years ago, and it completely changed my life as far as prioritizing sleep. Forks Over Knives and the Game Changers. I'm one of the executive producers of Game Changers. You can stream that on Netflix and Amazon, and that's got all of the athletes. So from Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lewis Hamilton, the Tennessee Titans, the vegan bodybuilders. It's all about the athletes that changed their diet and then went on to break their own records and outperform their past history. There's a couple websites that I referenced earlier, and we'll make these available through the recording, and Farm USA will probably be able to provide these. So I'm going to